It's movie time!
Just kidding. We're not going to do the whole review like that. I think I would go completely nuts, and so would you. Hey everybody. Welcome to Reviews, or as I'm starting to call it, R squared, because that's just an absolute mouthful, and I don't know why I named it what I did. Maybe I need to come up with a better name for it. But thank you for joining me this week. I promise it won't be as long as last week's episode, but I sure appreciate y'all tuning in for it. This week I'm doing A Quiet Place, which was definitely a step out of what I'm used to. This movie was requested to me by Alan. What I did was I had everyone post me on Facebook, and I drew I put all the suggestions in a hat, and then I drew them out of a hat. This hat, it's a good hat. It's my favorite hat. And he got it 2 weeks in a row, because he had Lego Batman last week too. So this is only my second review, so bear with me a little bit. I'm still getting this together. And what better time to do the Quiet Place review than at 5 o'clock in the morning, where the most sound you might hear is my cats in my air conditioning, because I don't dare turn that off. It's like 90 degrees at 5 o'clock in the morning, so I'm not shutting that off. I don't feel like that's really going to bother us, though. Hi, Parker. Here's a cat. This movie, A Quiet Place, was, when I looked it up, it was horror, and I think that's mostly what kept me away from watching it, because horror really isn't my genre, and I'm not one for jump scares. I really don't care for blood and guts, and I think that's a lot of what kept me away from it. But it is rated PG-13, and I think that kind of softened it up for me, and when it was requested, I was like, alright, that's not too bad. And so I watched it, and I think the horror was kind of a little bit of an exaggeration. I wouldn't call it horror, personally. I would put it as suspense. I never felt horrified at all throughout this movie. I felt suspense. Like, I felt what's going to happen next. And to me, that's suspense. But the sci-fi, I can see that with the monsters. And, you know, they never really tell you where the monsters come from. You have to pay attention to the newspapers and stuff throughout the movie. When you get down to the nitty-gritty, what you've got here is some good old-fashioned what's going to happen next. And even though this wasn't my genre, I have to say I enjoyed it for what it was. And I mean, I've always liked Stephen King movies, so going into this, I didn't know what to expect, and it was okay. I didn't mind it. So the cast, let's get into the cast. We didn't have a very big cast in this movie, and I think that's a lot of what kept it good for what it was. I think with a bigger cast, it would have been much harder to pull off. And this movie was done in a very short time frame. I think it was shot in only between May through September or something like that. And I think with a bigger cast, it would have been a lot harder to pull off. More people to teach sign language, more people to keep quiet on set. And with that, you know, that's a lot tougher. So we had John Krasinski as Lee Abbott, who was the husband, the father. He's known mainly for The Office, which that's my genre. That's where I sit, and that's where I knew him from. And that would have been my main turn on for going to it by myself to watch it. And he was also in Jack Ryan, which I watched, which was hugely out of my genre. So like I said, he's someone who would pull me to something that I would not normally watch. And he did pull me to something that I did not normally watch, which was Jack Ryan. Emily Blunt, who is John Krasinski's wife in real life, as well as in this movie, she played Evelyn Abbott. And I'm not sure, I've never seen her in anything other than this. but I know she was in the newest Mary Poppins, the Mary Poppins remake. Millicent Simmons, she played Regan Abbott, who was the daughter who was deaf. She is deaf in real life. Fun fact. So maybe she helped them with their sign language, although I do know that they did have a sign language coach on the sidelines, helping them with their sign language and teaching them as they went, correcting them, and that kind of thing. And then Noah Jupe played Marcus Abbott, who was the son. And I think they did a really good job matching up the kids to John and Emily, even though they weren't actually related. So the synopsis of the movie, I had a really hard time kind of pulling an unspoiled synopsis out of this. I don't know why I had such a hard time. Maybe it was because this isn't my type of movie. Maybe it's just because everything in the movie was visual and, they didn't say as much. But since I'm creating my own synopses for these movies and not going on to IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes and getting anything off of these, I'm trying to create these synopses out of my mind. I'm having a harder time with this one for some reason, but this is what I pulled out of it. So, A Quiet Place is the story of Evelyn and Lee Abbott and their two children, Regan and Marcus. Their family lives in an unfortunate time when any sound louder than the draw of a breath has the potential to alert large creatures who are good at tearing humans to shreds, and they do, and they will. Throughout the movie, Evelyn and Lee show time and time again just how far parents will go to protect their children no matter the circumstances. Their deaf daughter Regan struggles to overcome her heavy guilt. Their son Marcus overcomes his fears, while they all simultaneously fight to keep the creatures from coming after them by being as quiet as possible at all times. And this is a big movie for parents and children. Like, it's as big of a family movie as it is a thriller, as it is a suspense movie, as it is a quiet movie. Like, there's just as much love, just as much sibling rivalry as there would be in a movie with a billion lines of dialogue. So I was told by multiple people to watch this in surround sound. And most of the people who, told me this was a good movie, my friends, even my coworkers, know that I'm not big on horror, as I've mentioned multiple times. I'm not big on horror suspense movies. I won't go see them in the theaters. I don't like jump scares. I absolutely hate being startled. I'll, punch someone in the face. I thought by telling me to watch this in surround sound, I genuinely thought that people were trying to tell me this in order to get me to jump higher, to scream louder, to, be surprised further. But I soon found out, it wasn't very far in the movie that I found out that the surround sound is more for me to hear what is not there than what is there. Which sounds very backward. But I promise it's not. I watched it and I used headphones. And I did get interrupted a few times during the movie, which was very frustrating for me because the movie flows very well. The movie counts on this underlining tone of the ambiance of what's going on around the characters. So, not just what is being said or the look that's being given between the characters or what they are doing, but what's happening around them. So the surround sound was a good note. That's all I'm saying. Something else that I really liked about the movie was the sign language. As someone who grew up around sign language, I may be a little biased, but I was very, very... I thought it was really, really cool to see it represented in the way that it was. Instead of just whispering or falling back on something mundane, like using like a white dry erase board or something, they went with learning sign language. And, they had a deaf daughter, and she had been deaf since before the creatures arrived, according to the day that we first saw the movie. I think it was day 89 or something. I'll go over that later. But they had other reasons for knowing sign language, but the impression was still made on me that the movie, the writers still gave that nod to sign language, that they had other reasons for going on, and who knows what would have been different had we been looking in on a different family other than the Abbott family. And on that note, it's how cool is it that this entire movie could be watched and understood by someone who was deaf or hard of hearing, with no assistance. They could turn off the subtitles and be perfectly fine. This movie could make perfect sense with the sound turned completely off. This is the right movie for it. So I'm about to nerd out for a second. But part of me can't help but relate this to the Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode Hush. That episode, it's partly creepy because these guys come into town and they steal the voices of the entire town so no one can speak. But this movie just takes that a step further by taking away sound in its entirety, or else everyone will die. Now, I'm not saying by any means that anything is ripped off. That's not my point whatsoever. I'm just saying my thoughts went there, and I mean, that's awesome. This movie just had some incredible acting all around. The fact that there was very little dialogue meant that the actors and actresses probably had to pull something out of themselves that you don't see very often. There's a lot of acting with the eyes. If you go back and you watch, I remember seeing a Lord of the Rings documentary when I was younger. I used to be very into Lord of the Rings, and I remember seeing a documentary where the casting director said that they cast Elijah Wood because he could act with his eyes. And I remember watching Lord of the Rings after that and thinking to myself, yeah, dude, like, he conveyed his emotions strictly through his eyes. And if you go through A Quiet Place and you watch, a lot of the actors in this movie, it zooms in on their faces a lot because that's where their reactions are, and that's where the acting takes place, is in their eyes. Their emotions are through their eyes. Their reactions are through their eyes. Their feelings, just everything is through their eyes and their face. And that is so cool because we can't see ourselves. Even when the camera is rolling, the actors can't see themselves. I can see myself right now, but I'm trying not to look at myself. But I mean, hey, baby. But the actors can't see themselves to know whether they're conveying the right act. Like, they have to trust themselves. They have to trust each other for this kind of movie. And the fact that they are just getting it directly on point with this great acting, fantastic. And I loved that. I tried really hard to find something bad to say about this movie. And I feel like I said the same thing about Lego Batman. But I did try really hard to find something bad about this movie because this was a very well put together movie. I did find something though. There was a little bit of predictability that I didn't like. And I mean, I know that every movie, especially thrillers or suspenses, are gonna have their predictability moments. And that's just how they go. There was only one time I covered my eyes, and that was because I knew something was gonna happen and I didn't want to see it. And I'm not gonna spoil it, and I'm not gonna say what it was, but I promise you it wasn't a jump scare. It was because I knew something was coming and I didn't want to see it. And I knew it was gonna be gross. And if you've seen the movie and you want to know what it was, please feel free to ask me about it. I promise it's probably not what you're thinking it was. But that little bit of predictability, I understand it's got to be in there just to kind of throw it in there so that one person could have that really bad day. You probably know who I was talking about in the movie. But it really didn't need to be in there. So that's one of the only bad things that I could really see in there. There were some surprises in there. Some things that I didn't see coming. I definitely didn't see coming. Something else that was really hard for me, I wouldn't call this a bad thing. This is definitely a personal preference type of thing. Probably simply because I've been conditioned to finding this right off the bat. since the movie didn't have that much dialogue, we didn't find that much out about our characters. I had to look up on IMDb what their names were, because I don't think their names are really ever said in the movie. Maybe they're written down somewhere and I just didn't catch it. But we never learned their names. And we never find anything out about their background. Lee was sitting there working on Reagan's cochlear implant. He's soldering something. And I'm sitting there wondering, how does he know how to do this? Does he have an engineering background? And I think eventually it shows that he had a bunch of books there. But it didn't show that at first. And I was just very confused. And then they had like an IV hookup for the mom at one point. And I wondered how they knew how to do that. And I understand it's post-apocalyptic, and you eventually learn how to do that stuff. But when they were only, 2 years into this, by the end of the movie, I really don't feel like that's enough time to learn how to hook up an IV, use an oxygen tank, do a lot of the things that they were learning how to do. Maybe that's just me. I feel like I'm a fast learner. Maybe not, but I honestly don't feel like I could learn how to, do half the stuff they did. Hook up solar panels. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being picky. I'm definitely being picky, but, I mean, it's my movie review. I don't know. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have an explanation for it? Definitely. Give me an explanation. I'm 100% open. I'd like to know, please. Alright, let's get into some fun little snippets that I found out about the movie. I'm sure everyone already knows this, but John Krasinski, Emily Blunt, they are married in real life. Yep. The movie had a budget of between $17 and $21 million, and it grossed right around $340 million in theaters. So that was a definite win for Krasinski. For the producers, for the makers. The movie only contains about 25 voiced lines of dialogue. One of the taglines of the film is "Red means run," and if you'll notice, if you've seen the film, this is not a spoiler, I promise. If you'll notice, at one point during the movie, one of the creatures is on the property. And Evelyn is alone in the house. She goes to the fuse box and lights up the lights outside, and they are red, as opposed to the normal color that they usually are. And that's so that Lee knows there's danger ahead, so that he knows that he needs to not come on the property or figure something out. Here's some things that I kind of jotted down as I was watching that they did to avoid sound while they were in their house. Or while they were out and about. They never closed doors. I noticed their front door was always open. Their basement door was always open. Their bedroom doors were always open. They didn't use dishes when they were eating or cooking. They used corn husks instead. They used sign language, as I mentioned before. They painted paths on the floor where the boards were less creaky so that they could walk on tiptoes and be more quiet. They walked barefoot. And then they walked everywhere on sand, which had to be a heck of a thing. Where did he get all the sand to just put it down? I mean, there were some long paths there. They walked from their house to all the way to the city. And they started off on like day 89, I think. And they were walking all the way to the city on a path of sand. He must have set that up pretty quickly. So one more thing I wanted to address before I get to the end here. Being the somewhat ignorant person that I am, the whole time I was kind of wondering, even with my best friend's mom being deaf, I wondered to myself as I watched how a deaf person would know what kind of impact their actions were having sound-wise. Like, I know they can feel vibrations, but if, in the movie, they're not even supposed to make enough sound to do that, how did Reagan, the deaf daughter, know that she was being silent enough not to draw the creatures? Like, she had a cochlear implant, but it didn't work. So, I kind of looked around the interwebs for my answers. So first of all, the movie starts at day 89, so I've been right this whole time. And what I'm assuming is that meant 89 days into the creature's occupation. The fact that she was a teenager when she had to learn what sounds were okay and what sounds were not probably made it a little easier to figure out. Not to mention she has her brother, mother, and father to look for cues. So Reagan could have been born deaf, and she could have been born hearing. That cochlear implant may have worked at one point. We don't know. The fact that he was trying to fix it suggests that it did work at one point, and she does know, what things sound like, or at least the effect that sound has on things. So I guess maybe that little case study of mine only was for me, but maybe it answered some questions for you. Alright, so the parent's guide. Is it okay to watch with kids in the room? This movie is rated PG-13, and I think that's a pretty solid rating. There's gore, but there's not an insane amount. I'm pretty squeamish. I only covered my eyes once. There's surprisingly not a lot of jump scares. It's probably okay to watch this if your kids are just in the room with you and not paying attention to the TV. There's not any foul language or really any spoken language at all. So, as always, it's up to you, the parent, but my nephews are right around teenager age, and I'd probably let them watch this. Like I said, not a lot of gore, and it's really just suspense. What's going to happen next? To end things out, it's on Amazon Prime right now. If you got Amazon Prime, it's free. I say go watch it. That's my overall thoughts on it. I say go watch it if you're looking for a good thriller. I'd own it, and I'd watch it again, but I wouldn't say I'd own it. I'd watch it over and over and over again. That's just because, like I said earlier, my brain can't handle that kind of silence. I'm just not cut out for that kind of quiet over and over again. I had a very hard time finding something bad to say about this movie. There were things I personally didn't understand, but seeing as there's a second part, I may get my answers. It is a very solid movie with solid acting. I went in with no expectations and was very happy with what I found. I'm glad I saw it, and I'll definitely watch part 2 when it comes out. Share, leave a like, and subscribe if you haven't already. Tell me what you thought of the movie down in the comments. Throw me a suggestion of what to review next, either in the comments or on my Facebook, and I'll use the same process to pick as I did last week. Thank you for the support. I love you all, and cowabunga. Tell me what you thought of the movie in the comments. And, what?